If you're watching this, there's a good chance your breathing feels off, not dramatic, not necessarily painful, just wrong. And what makes this experience so unsettling is how difficult it is to explain to other people. You might say, I can breathe, but it doesn't feel right. Or I'm getting air, but it doesn't feel satisfying. Or it feels like I have to think about breathing all the time. Some people describe a tight feeling in the chest. Others describe air hunger, like they can't quite get a full breath, no matter how deeply they inhale. Some people say their breathing feels shallow. Others say it feels like they can't quite finish a breath. Many people notice themselves yawning or sighing repeatedly, trying to get that one breath that finally feels normal again. Sometimes it works for a moment and then the sensation comes right back. One of the most common phrases people use is, it feels like I'm manually breathing, like I have to work to make myself breathe. If that phrase resonates with you, I want to say this clearly right at the start. You are not alone and you are not unusual. This experience is extremely common, even though it's rarely explained in a way that actually makes sense. You might notice the sensation most when you're resting, when you're lying in bed at night, or sitting quietly, or when you're trying to relax. In fact, one of the most consistent things people say is, it actually feels worse when I'm doing nothing. The detail matters more than most people realize. Before we get into the explanation, though, I want to slow this down and say something very important. If this is happening to you, you're not weak, you're not imagining it, it's not in your head, and you are not broken. The sensation is very real. It's uncomfortable, and for many people, it is deeply distressing. Breathing is different from most other sensations in the body. If your knee hurts or your shoulder hurts, it can be uncomfortable or even painful, but it usually does not make you question your safety. Breathing does. Breathing is tied directly to your survival. So when breathing feels wrong, the brain does not stay neutral. It starts monitoring. That monitoring shows up as checking whether the breath feels deep enough, checking whether it feels smooth, checking whether it feels normal, checking whether something is being missed, checking whether you're getting enough air. Once that checking gets started, it can be very hard to turn it off. Over time, the checking itself becomes exhausting. For many people, this does not stay contained to just your breathing. It affects your sleep or your focus. It affects work. It affects conversations you're trying to have with others. It affects the sense of safety in your own body. And most people do not simply just sit with that experience. They try to figure it out. They check their oxygen. They Google the symptoms. They go see their doctor. Chest x-rays. They get CT scans. They get heart tests. They get pulmonary function tests. They might see multiple providers. And very often, after all of that, they're told something like, everything looks normal, or your lungs are fine, or your oxygen is perfect. Okay, the sentence is meant to be reassuring. They want to make you feel better and want you to know that you are okay. But emotionally, sometimes that just does not get through because the sensation is still there. If everything is normal, why does breathing still feel so wrong? That question becomes the new focus, and that question quietly keeps the loop alive. I want to pause here for a moment so you understand where this explanation is coming from. I'm a registered respiratory therapist. It's my job. I work with lungs and breathing for a living. I'm a lifelong asthmatic myself and anxiety sufferer as well. It's why I went to college for this. I look at oxygen levels in my job, carbon dioxide levels, breathing patterns, ventilators, respiratory mechanics all week long. I get breathing treatments too, which I'll get into in a later video. But one of the really confusing things for people, though, is that your breathing can feel very wrong, even when everything I'm trained to measure in you is completely normal. I see this pattern over and over again, both clinically and in people who reach out to me. Friends, family members often have breathing questions. Here's the first thing we need to gently clear up, because it's the biggest misconception in this entire experience. It's usually not a lung problem. The statement doesn't mean the sensation isn't real. It does not mean you are exaggerating or freaking yourself out. And it does not mean nothing is happening. It means the source of the sensation is not what it actually feels like to you. Your lungs are designed to work quietly in the background. When breathing is functioning normally, you do not feel it. You just don't. You don't feel oxygen exchange. You don't feel every inhale and exhale. You don't feel your lungs doing their job. The absence of sensation is actually a sign that the system is working well. From a critical or clinical standpoint, when there's a true lung problem, we usually see it shows up somewhere measurable. Your oxygen levels are going to make a drastic change. Carbon dioxide levels change. Your breathing pattern changes in a specific and very predictable way. What's tricky is that the sensation people describe here does not match those patterns, even though it feels just as real. That mismatch is one of the reasons this experience is really unsettling. So when I say this usually isn't a lung problem, I'm not dismissing that sensation that you're feeling. I'm saying the source isn't lung failure. The source is attention and monitoring. When attention locks onto breathing, the experience of breathing changes. Breathing shifts from an automatic process to something you are monitoring or watching at all times. And once that happens, every sensation gets louder. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's being observed. Here's an important reframe for you. What you're experiencing is usually not failure. It's checking. Your body has not forgotten how to breathe. Your lungs haven't suddenly stopped doing their job. What's happening is that an automatic system is moved into conscious awareness. A helpful way to understand this is to think about blinking. Right now, blinking is happening automatically. You're not controlling it. But if you suddenly focus on blinking, it feels awkward. You might blink too much or too little. You might start controlling it deliberately, but nothing's broken. Attention simply stepped in and took over. Breathing works the same way. Once your brain starts checking in, asking questions like, am I doing this right? Am I breathing right? Or is this deep enough? Or why does this feel strange? Breathing moves into the spotlight when you ask those questions. And automatic systems do not like being supervised. They work best when they're trusted. This is why the sensation often intensifies the more you focus on it. It is also why it often feels worse when you sit down to rest, lay down to rest. You have time to actually think about it. This confuses many people. A lot of people assume that if it were anxiety related, would be worse when you're actually under stress or busy, but this pattern behaves differently. When you're busy, engaged, talking, moving, or focused on something outside your body, your attention is outward. Breathing fades into the background. But when you slow down, your brain does not necessarily slow down with you. At rest, attention turns inward. There's no task competing for focus, no conversation, no external anchor. So the brain starts scanning. And once it notices your breathing, it's going to keep checking. Each check increases that awareness, and increased awareness amplifies the sensation that you're feeling. Amplified sensation triggers more checking. That's the loop that you get caught in. So this is why people often say that it feels worse at night, or worse when lying down, or worse when trying to sit around and just relax. It's not because your body's failing, it's because attention is persistent. And attention, once locked, can be incredibly convincing. The mind is a very powerful thing. Okay, here's the part that can be difficult to hear, and I want to approach it carefully. It makes complete sense to try to control your breathing. I totally get it. Anyone would. When something feels uncomfortable or threatening, the instinct is to fix it. Slow it down, deepen it, take better breaths, use techniques, focus harder. Control feels like safety. But here's the contradiction. Trying to control breathing often keeps it feeling manual. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because control keeps breathing in that spotlight. Automatic systems work best when they are allowed to run without supervision. The harder you try to make breathing feel right, the more mechanical it becomes. People often say, I don't know how to stop controlling it. And that makes complete sense because control feels like the only option. You are not crazy. In this situation, however, control keeps that loop active. It keeps your attention locked on. You focus and you can't look away. It prevents breathing from fading back into the background where we need it to be. This also explains why reassurance itself doesn't last. When your doc or your provider tells you that you're going to be okay, your breathing is fine, your oxygen is fine, your lungs are fine. Okay, you might check your pulse ox, your oxygen level, and you might look okay. You feel okay. You hear that your tests are normal. You feel calmer for a while, but then the sensation creeps back in. Not because anything changed, but because reassurance treats fear, not attention. Fear may quiet for a moment. Attention stays locked on, and attention is the fuel that we're dealing with here. This is why people can have those repeated normal tests and still feel unsettled. Nothing new is being discovered. The loop simply never shuts off. I've seen this over and over again in my work. I've had patients with severe lung disease like COPD or asthma who barely notice their breathing. And I've had people with completely normal lungs who are intensely aware of every breath they take. That contrast tells us something important. How breathing feels and how breathing functions are not always the same thing. Sensation and physiology do not always line up. So what's actually going to help out in this scenario? Not forcing, not fixing, not constantly checking. What helps is allowing breathing to fade back into the background again. And it doesn't happen by trying to ignore it. Trying to ignore it is still monitoring. It happens when attention naturally shifts, conversation, movement, engagement, doing something, absorbing outside your body. I like to take a walk outside. It's wintertime where I am, and get out in the cold air, and it kind of takes my attention off of what I'm doing, and it settles down my breathing. So your breathing actually doesn't need to feel normal in order to work manually, which is what I'm getting at. So the less you chase that sensation, the quieter it becomes. The process isn't instant. There will be moments when breathing still feels noticeable. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It means attention briefly snuck back in. And that's part of the process. The goal is not to eliminate the sensation. The goal is to stop reacting to it. Over time, without resistance or monitoring, breathing resumes its quiet, automatic role, quietly, naturally, without effort. All right, I do want to make a very clear point about safety here. If I thought this was something dangerous being missed, I would not be making this video. I take breathing very, very seriously. It is literally my job, and that's why I'm comfortable saying that this pattern is uncomfortable but not harmful. If your tests are normal and this description fits you, your body's not failing you. It's simply being watched by you. Is it uncomfortable? Yeah, of course. Annoying? Absolutely. Distressing? It definitely can be, but it's not dangerous and you are not broken. It's just stuck in the spotlight. You can't stop thinking about it, but systems calm down when that spotlight moves. If this resonated with you, you're not alone and you're not doing anything wrong. You do not need to fix your breathing. You don't need to stop. You do need to stop monitoring it. You don't need to fix it. Your breathing already knows what to do. If this helped, you don't need to keep watching anything right now. Let your attention move away. Let your body settle. And if you want more explanation like this later, I'll be here if you need me.